Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a How I Would Have Booked. Topic for this How I Would Have Booked: the inaugural WWF Intercontinental Championship from way back in 1979. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, in 1979, WWF decided to take the North American Championship and turn it into the WWF Intercontinental Championship. They said there was a tournament in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and Pat Patterson won that tournament to become the WWF Intercontinental Champion. He in the finals he combined it with the South American Championship on a tournament that never happened. They never went to Brazil. They never had this tournament. So my idea for this is, what if they did have the tournament? Who would be in it? How would it look? How would it play out? With that being said, this is my card for the inaugural WWF Intercontinental Championship, WWE now, they were WWF at the time. There's 8 wrestlers we're having involved. We're going to go with the first round, the matchups for the first round, and who would have won, and how they're going to advance. First match of the first round, Pat Patterson versus Greg the Hammer Valentine. Again, kind of a heel versus heel matchup here. But in a tournament like this, it's really not that important. It wouldn't have been something that was seen much at the time, but being that they're outside of the America in Rio de Janeiro, we want to put on there some of their bigger stars, and Patterson and Valentine would have been as such. I'm giving Patterson the first round win here. He's going to beat Valentine here to move on to the second round. Our next match is a young up-and-comer, Tito Santana, versus Hussein Arab. If you're not familiar with Hussein Arab, that's what the Iron Sheik went by before he decided to become the Iron Sheik. Again, Hussein Arab had a little bit of a name. Tito Santana was starting to build his legendary career already. A younger guy, a more exciting guy, Again, we're going to see with some of the people I put in here, a lot of it isn't to be based off the Intercontinental Championship representing all of the Americas. So Tito Santana, in the U.S., not so much Brazil, but he represented a Latin American population. Santana's going to pick up the win here. He's going to move on to the second round, where he's going to face Pat Patterson, and we'll cover that when we get there. Next up, we have Ivan Putski versus Larry Zbyszko. Larry Zbyszko's still a face at this time. This is pre him turning on Bruno by a few months. Both of these guys are both young and up-and-comers. This is a match I think that the fans would love to see, especially getting to see Bruno Sammartino's basically his pupil, seeing Ivan Putski, who at that point, if there was a worldwide wrestling press, they would have heard about him for years at this time. I'm going to give Zbyszko the win on this. Again, we're going to have some of the younger talent in more prominent roles because we're going to use them in the future more. Next up, we get a very young Ted DiBiase, who was a North American Championship before Pat Patterson won it from him, versus Nikolai Volkov, who was one of the main heels in the WWF at the time. This, again, is another match showing the diversity. A guy from Russia in there, and which actually I believe he was really from Lithuania, but I digress. I'm going to give Volkov the win here because it would be expected to have DiBiase win. We're going to make Volkov look like, in this coming out, that he's the unstoppable force, which if they would have read the magazines at the time, they would have seen him as. If they would have seen WWF television, they would have seen him as being an unstoppable force. So that leads us for the second round match with Zbyszko versus Volkov. We're going into the second round here. We get Pat Patterson going up against Tito Santana. In what I think would probably the best match on paper on the card. I'm going to give this one to Patterson. Santana's going to give a valiant effort, but the veteran's going to pull him out with his craftiness, putting Pat Patterson into the finals. And in our second semifinal match, I'm going to have Larry Zbyszko beating Nikolai Volkov, taking kind of a beating, almost getting a surprise win, and moving on where he's got quote-unquote injured, where he's not going into the main event at 100%, which is going to lead us into the finals, which will be Pat Patterson versus Larry Zbyszko. We see Zbyszko or Patterson attacks Zbyszko, attacks the injury. I believe Volkov was using a bear hug a lot, so we're going to go with it being a lower back injury. So we see Pat Patterson really working on that injury, really working him over in order to gain the upper hand. Zbyszko has several near falls where he almost wins the match, but ultimately the wear and tear of the tournament wears him down. Pat Patterson picks up the win. Just like in real life, he becomes the inaugural WWF Intercontinental Champion. After the match, we start to see some frustration with Larry Zbyszko. He's frustrated that he lost. He believes he could have won. Bruno Sammartino comes out to kind of console him. He kind of shrugs Bruno off a little bit. So we plant the seeds before they started planting the seeds for him turning on Bruno. We plant a little bit of seeds here, where we start to see a little bit more frustration of Zbyszko kicking in. Zbyszko, the story is, he was tired of being in Sammartino's shadow. This could be when they get to that point where they do Bruno and Zbyszko in Shea Stadium. This could be referenced as, I wanted to win the Intercontinental Championship. I thought being an Intercontinental Champion, being the first Intercontinental Champion, would help pull me out of your shadow. And I came up short. I came up a little bit short because I listened to you. I did what you said. Pat Patterson took the shortcuts, and he got the gold. He got the glory. That could be added into the Zbyszko and Sammartino feud, which is one of the biggest feuds in the history of the WWF, especially at that time frame. It was massive. It was one of the biggest feuds in wrestling. So for that, you got him going off. You have Patterson going off in the normal trajectory he would. Shortly after this, he would become a face. So basically, the two guys that were in the main event would switch within a year, which they do in real life. It doesn't change most things that are happening in real life, other than Zbyszko gets to add this into his grievances. Other than that, it goes on the same trajectory it already has. We just have the real tournament. In a special event, the WWE goes down to Rio de Janeiro. They bring the television cameras so they can shoot the highlights and show them on TV, which gives WWE a more global presence, even though that's not what Vince Sr. was going for. But it would make the company feel a little bit more special. With that being said, please smash that like button, share, subscribe if you haven't, and let me know what you think. Do you like this idea, this tournament that never happened, that I'm going to book out of nowhere? Do you think maybe someone else should have been the inaugural WWE Intercontinental Champion or WWF Intercontinental Champion? Let me know your opinion. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think about this. If you like this format, I don't do these that often because a lot of times they take a lot of preparation. You have to really go back and research who was in the territory or who was in the company at the time. And it takes a lot to do this, and sometimes I just don't have the time to put them together. This one, it was something that I thought of, and I thought it was a cool idea. So I've been piecing it together for a little bit of time. And finally we get this product here. Again, let me know what you think. Who would you still have had Pat Patterson win? Would you have somebody else go over? Hit me up in the comments. If you made it all the way to the end, let's put Stooges in there for Pat Patterson. And God, I love Pat. Pat was awesome. With all that being said, My name is George Coles, and this is how I would have booked the inaugural WWF Intercontinental Champion.